Coming up, the Magic beat the buzzer and the Grizzlies blow a lead to Philly. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts join us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Struggles on the road continuing for Memphis. They blew a 17-point lead last night in Philly. Locked On Grizzlies is in to go over what went wrong late against the 76ers.
The Memphis Grizzlies surrendered yet another major lead in the fourth quarter in the final frame to fall in Philadelphia at the hands of the 76ers. And there's lots of blame to go around. It's never one source's fault. But there are two folks in particular that really need to think about things some when it comes to how this game played out for the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm Joe Mullinax from Locked On Grizzlies, and one of those names is Ja Morant. Ja Morant had a rough outing coming out of the All-Star break. 3 of 16 from the field. He was 9 for 10 from the charity stripe, which is nice to see, but your superstar player needs to be able to make big-time plays, and he simply didn't do that, especially down the stretch when Memphis needed him most. The other name is Taylor Jenkins, the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. He played Brandon Clark, who started the contest, only 15 minutes. Xavier Tillman, who played well, played 32 minutes. Tillman played extended time because he doesn't trust Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5. They asked X to do too much. They didn't ask Jaren to do enough. Between Ja and Jenkins, plenty of blame to go around for this collapse in the fourth.
Miles Turner had a career night dropping 40, but it was spoiled by Boston, who came out on top after overtime in Indiana. Locked On Celtics and Locked On Pacers are in to go over a game that went down to the wire.
Boston Celtics get an ugly win, but it's a win in Indiana in overtime. I'm John Corrales of the Locked On Celtics podcast. 20 offensive rebounds was the key to this game. Celtics getting putbacks, and hey, at least that showed that they were working hard, because offensive rebounds are mainly effort plays. They just, I think Marcus Smart and Jayson Tatum especially look like they were still on the All-Star break. The putbacks, especially Tatum's one at the end, were huge. Extending possessions, getting extra possessions were big. The Celtics turnovers kept Indiana in the game, and then Miles Turner got super, super hot. If he had a normal shooting night, maybe this goes a little bit differently. Thankfully, the Celtics had Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White. Those two guys were huge for Boston. When Tatum didn't have it going early, and when Marcus Smart looked unplayable in the first half, maybe first 3 quarters, it was Brogdon and White who really stepped up for the Celtics. Depth carries the Celtics through. This was not a game that we're going to put into the Hall of Fame, but now the Celtics head off to Philly. Maybe that one will be better.
Pacers fall to the Celtics 142-138 in overtime. Crazy game in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, and that was one of the most fun games of the season. Such a back and forth battle, 22 lead changes, and for the Pacers it came down to some of their casual and usual kryptonites this season. Offensive rebounds. The Celtics had 20 of them. They had 22 second chance points. Pacers only had 13. That ended up being a huge difference because the Pacers did so many things well in this game. They battled back from down 16 to take a lead. They got this game to overtime. Tyrese Haliburton had 14 points and a double-double. Miles Turner had 40 points, a career-high 8 threes, tied his career-high scoring. They found a way to play well in the second half on both ends of the floor at times. It was really an encouraging performance for the Pacers, but their poor first half where they were down 16 in offensive rebounds meant it wasn't meant to be a victory night. We'll break down the game and Turner's performance on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
Another triple-double by the reigning MVP. That meant another win for Denver, this time in Cleveland. Locked On Cavs, though, finds a bright spot in Evan Mobley's performance.
Hey, Chris Manning here, Locked On Cavs. Evan Mobley has 31-9 against the Denver Nuggets, but it's not enough. The Cavs lose 115-109. The big difference, three-point shooting. The Nuggets were scorching from 3, up near 50%. The Cavs under 30%. It was a 33-point advantage for Denver just on three-pointers alone. But if there's a big takeaway from Cleveland's perspective, it's that Evan Mobley was him. He was awesome. He went toe-to-toe with Jokic. He was not scared of going at Jokic at any point. Had a very old-school game with hook shots and drives and dunks in the paint. It was a maybe the best offensive performance that Evan Mobley has ever had in the NBA. He was awesome. He started off his last stretch of his second season on a really high note. This is the best player from the 2021 draft class, bar none. He went at Jokic in this game, was awesome on both ends. Can't say anything less about him. You would have liked to win for the Cavs if you're them, but you'll take the Evan Mobley performance. They get Atlanta tomorrow. For more, check out Locked On Cavs.
The Raptors front office looking real smart right about now after that trade deadline deal, while New Orleans is continuing to struggle in their first game back from the All-Star break. Locked On Pelicans in and Locked On Raptors as well as they go over these teams that are moving in different directions right now.
The New Orleans Pelicans are going to need to make bigger changes if that's what they looked like coming out of the All-Star break. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans. Without Zion Williamson, the Pelicans have struggled offensively for a while now. And while we hope the All-Star break may lead to some changes, 45 points in the first half against the Toronto Raptors says otherwise. There's still talent here in New Orleans. Brandon Ingram got it going with 36 points. CJ McCollum chipped in 23. But that was about it for the offense. And at times, it was just a struggle to score at all. And it's why New Orleans wasn't able to get over the hump and take the lead against the Raptors despite multiple chances. While loss is frustrating, this team is still close. Some tweaks to add more off-ball movement, ball screens, more from big man Jonas Valanciunas, but the coaching staff has yet to make those adjustments. It's something they've really struggled doing all season long. Zion's out for a while, and if the Pelicans want to solidify a playoff spot, adjustments need to happen now.
Yeah, I'm thinking that trade's going to work out all right. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors' 115-110 win over the New Orleans Pelicans to come out of the All-Star break with their third straight victory, moving to 29-31 on the season as they continue their push to a potential 6th seed in the Eastern Conference if they can go on a heater here. And the big takeaway from this game is that Jakob Poeltl, that trade continues to look freaking incredible. Just 4 games into the Jakob Poeltl 2.0 era with the Raptors, and already he has been absolutely essential to the Raptors picking up wins in their last 3 games. He, of course, had 30 points on 15 of 17 shooting with 6 blocks in the last game before the All-Star break. This time out, 21 points and 18 rebounds, 9 of 11 shooting, hit a big late free throw, had a ton of easy buckets around the rim in the fourth quarter to keep the Raptors afloat on offense as they got a little bit creaky down the stretch with no Fred VanVleet in the lineup for personal reasons. Jakob Poeltl makes this team make so much more sense. Everyone knows where to stand. They run pick and roll now, and they have real earnest rim protection and big man scoring in the form of Jakob Poeltl. The Raptors now go on the road for a couple of games in Detroit and Cleveland, and it should be really fascinating to see this team make their push for the 6th seed down the stretch. They're still quite a ways out, but the way they've played, the way Jakob Poeltl makes them make more sense, they certainly stand a chance of getting on a hot run here to close the season. I'll have more broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
Coming up, a buzzer beater in Orlando. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is sponsored by BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do a lot of great things, and working with a therapist can help you get to the best version of yourself. I've been in therapy for years. I find it really great to get an outside perspective on some of my problems, help me work through some things, and it really just makes you a better version of yourself. So if you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a really great option for you because it's convenient and flexible, and you can do it entirely online as well. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today. You can get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. A dramatic buzzer beater for the Young Guns in Orlando as they beat the Pistons in dramatic fashion last night. Locked On Magic breaks down that finish in Orlando. Locked On Pistons has the losing side of a heartbreaker.
This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, and not 10, 15, 20 minutes ago, right behind me over there, Wendell Carter won the game following a putback dunk from Paolo Banchero for a 108-106 victory for the Orlando Magic. Over the last few days in practice, the Orlando Magic have said they've watched back some of their close games. They've watched playoff games. They're trying to learn how to close games and how to win late to make this play-in push, to make up the ground that they've got to make up to try and play some extra basketball in April. It wasn't wasn't perfect tonight. Far from it. It was a long way from perfect. The Orlando Magic have a lot to improve on to close games, as Jaden Ivey went nuts in the fourth quarter to make this a tie game and put the Pistons in a good chance to win it. Paolo Banchero even missed a critical shot, but Wendell Carter followed the dunk, followed it up, made the basket, made the play, and after replay review showed that the ball was off the cylinder, the Orlando Magic came away with the win. It doesn't matter how you get them sometimes, it only matters that you get them. And the Orlando Magic got a pretty big win to start their run after the All-Star break tonight at the Amway Center.
Luka and Kyrie slowly figuring out how to work well together offensively in a pretty easy matchup against the Spurs. Locked On Mavs is in to go over the highlights of the night.
After the All-Star break, the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic and Kyrie's third game together get a win. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here. And the Dallas Mavericks offense was humming, just humming the entire game. Luka, Kyrie, they were working their Luka in the first quarter, Kyrie in the fourth quarter. They really were playing really well, playing offense really well. The story of this team is going to be defense for the rest of the season, and this game was definitely one that showed it to you. When you have a San Antonio Spurs team that's third from last in the NBA in offense come in here and have a much better offensive game than they're usually used to, it's going to be a problem. But the Dallas Mavericks take care of business. They get the win. They get a bunch of garbage time. Justin Holiday, the new player for the Mavericks off the buyout market, hits 4 threes in the game. An incredible night for 5 threes in the game. An incredible night from Justin Holiday. Reggie Bullock adds a bunch of threes of his own, and the Dallas Mavericks get the win. They move on now and look to the rest of the season.
Lauri Markkanen scored 43 points for Utah. They would need every single one of them to get the win in overtime. Locked On Jazz talks over the first win of the second half of the season.
In overtime, the Utah Jazz come from behind to hold off Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and win over the Oklahoma City Thunder 120-119. David Locke of Locked On Jazz, Lauri Markkanen, his first game back in Salt Lake City after appearing in the All-Star game, was a monster. 43 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 assists. He scored 16 of the Jazz 20 points at one point in the fourth quarter as the Jazz were able to hold off a Thunder team that led by 8. Only the 5th loss of the season by the Thunder when they led at the half, the fewest of any team in the Western Conference. Walker Kessler's the story as well, though. Walker, with an offensive rebound inside 3 Thunder players, tied the game with 4 seconds left and then blocked Isaiah Joe at the buzzer sounded in regulation to force overtime. And then it was Markkanen along with Jordan Clarkson carrying the rest of the way for the Jazz as they win it in overtime in the first of 4 matchups of the Thunder between now and the end of the season.
That will do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcasts on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.